Special thanks to the K Family Foundation, lead underwriters for MOSAIC. Hello, my name is Barbara Kay, and on behalf of the Jewish Federation of Palm Beach County, I'd like to welcome you to our program, MOSAIC. Our special guest on MOSAIC today is the political commentator, New York Times journalist, author, David Brooks. We'll be back with our guest and our program right after this brief message.
I'm Mark Levy, President of the Jewish Federation of Palm Beach County.
And I'm Zelda Mason, Chair of Federation's Golden Anniversary Celebration. In the months to come, our Federation will commemorate this Golden Anniversary year with many exciting programs, including the premiere event with commentator David Brooks, Women's Philanthropy Pride of Our Lions, and B&P's Big Night Out with Jason Alexander. So please, plan to join us as we honor our past and toast our future. Happy 50th anniversary.
Maybe tonight, maybe tonight.
Welcome to Palm Beach and MOSAIC. It's a pleasure to have you here.
It's good to be here.
Listen, I've read your books, The Social Animal, very, very interesting, and also Bobo's in Paradise. Let's talk about The Social Animal first. What made you write the book? What motivated you?
Well, if you want the shallow answer, I've got a shallow answer and a deep answer.
Okay.
The shallow answer is that I was looking at high school dropout rates, because that's so crucial to who succeeds in life. And it quickly became obvious it was the first 3 years of life made all the difference. And so then that gets you into how kids at 18 months attach to mom. It gets you into brain formation. It gets you into a lot of emotional things. And so I sort of got there through public policy. The other answer is that, you know, I'm 50 years old. You know, you're middle-aged, you've been dealing with politics, with money, economics, stuff like that. And you have a sense that, well, there's a lot more going on in life you really want to understand. Having to do with relationships, having to do with emotions, stuff that actually matters most to people. And so here was a group of scientists, oddly, who were describing to me things about relationships and emotions that I didn't understand, giving me details of how relationships are built and how they work. And I'm like a typical middle-aged man. My wife jokes that me writing a book about emotion is like Gandhi writing a book about gluttony. It's not my natural thing. But once that is the most important thing, and I want to understand it.
I think men in general have a predisposition to be a little bit reticent about talking about their emotions anyway.
There's a fake brain. This is not a real brain study, but it says something true, which is they take a bunch of guys, put them in these fMRI machines where they do brain scans. They have them watch a horror movie, and then they have them ask them to describe their feelings toward their wives. And the brains in both activities is the same. It's sheer terror in both activities. So yeah, that's true.
You know, when you in the introduction to The Social Animal, you say, you're about to give me a promise as a reader. I'm going to read probably one of the happiest books I've ever read.
Yeah.
Now, what made you say that?
Well, it's actually a takeoff on a opening line from Ford Maddox Ford, which is about his book was called, his first sentence was, "This is the saddest story you'll ever read." But this is a book about the things that actually make you happy. And one of the things, you know, a lot of things contribute to happiness. So money has something to do with happiness. The richer you get, the happier you get up until a certain point. After that, it doesn't matter so much. Age has something to do with happiness. So people are pretty happy in their 20s, and then they go down a little through life, and they hit their bottom of happiness at age 47. And that's called having teenage children. And then it comes up, And your happiest period of life is the 10 years after retirement, 65, 75 for most people. And so age has something to do, but the crucial thing to happiness is how many close relationships you have. And so joining a club that meets once a month doubles your happiness. It's equal to doubling your income. So just tremendously powerful. Obviously having a great marriage, great friendships, even being close to your siblings at age 20 is a very good predictor how happy you'll be at age 80.
You know something, it's interesting. You took, the way you wrote the book, you took a character, two characters, Harold and Erica. And the story of all your concepts revolves around the two of them. How did you pick them?
Well, I wanted to do it, I'm a journalist, I'm not an academic. And so I need to see concrete examples. It helps me understand what's going on. So I created these characters in part to give myself like concrete examples so it would explain how it actually happens in real life. Second, this is a book about the two levels on which we think, the rational level and the emotional level. And I thought I'd try to write the book on both levels. So it hit you a little emotionally but also rationally. And then I just thought it'd be more fun to write and read.
Well, you even had Harold in the womb.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that he was affected by his environment and his mother, even that early.
Yeah, babies in the womb are doing a lot.
Yeah.
And so if a mother reads a Cat in the Hat book to a baby in the womb, when the baby comes out, the baby will recognize the rhythm of that. They're learning language. So French babies and German babies come out and cry differently because they've heard different accents already. So the brain is thinking in there.
Yeah, that's what it's fascinating. I tell you, this is a fascinating read anyway. But you have to read it slowly and reread it.
Well, I crammed in as much interesting stuff as I possibly could. And even now, since I finished the book, I found more interesting stuff. I'm going to mention when I speak at the Breakers, that if you eat alone, you eat this much. If you eat on average with one other person, you eat on average 35% more. If you eat with 3 other people, you eat on average 78% more. So sociability makes us eat more.
Yeah, so but relationships are interesting. They say, for instance, Erica and Harold had a very unique relationship. But there was a rhythm to their relationship, and you say that's what's important. Some sort of a special rhythm. Also, they say that you usually marry a psychological equal. Yeah,
so one of the things we do is we coordinate our IQs. When we meet people, we coordinate our heart rates begin to coordinate, our breathing patterns, the speed of our speech begins to coordinate. We coordinate our vocabularies. So people at a certain IQ level have a certain set of words they use. People at another level may have another set. But in a successful conversation, they meet each other at the same level. And we're not even aware of that, but we're really good at harmonizing. And when you get that harmonization, that's how love actually happens. And it happens with IQ, with breathing, with gesture. If you watch people at a dinner table at a first date, you'll see them doing the same gestures. People tend to marry people with similar eye width, similarly apart, similar nose width. They say opposites attract. In real life, no, similarity attracts.
Yeah. It's fascinating, but you talk also about not only the conscious level, but you speak a great deal about the unconscious level and how that really defines the way we look at life.
Yeah, so we
respond to life.
We have this little story in our head that we tell how our life is leading, but that's a myth. Most of what our thinking is unconscious, so the human mind can take in 12 million pieces of information, of which we can be aware of just 40. So all the rest is below awareness. And so that little example of eating is an example of something unconscious. Another example is, say, there are millions of different studies about this, but one of them was Israeli parole boards. Prisoners come out, talk to the parole board for 6 minutes, and on average, Israeli parole boards grant parole to these prisoners in 35% of the cases, except in the hour after breakfast and lunch, when they grant parole not in 35%, but in 65%. And that's because they're full, and unconsciously they're more welcoming. So another example is if you're sending in your med school application, you want the admissions committee to review your application on a sunny day, because admit rates are way higher on sunny days than rainy days. We're not aware of any of this stuff, but we're influenced by all these things.
You know what's amazing? All of these influences and all of our attitudes toward life really are already predetermined in a sense, not only in, when you're born, before you're born. What happens, in a sense, to your moral attitudes? These are also part and parcel of your environment?
Some of them, but you know, it's influenced. But I think a lot of the scientists think we have no free will, that the illusion that we control our lives is just an illusion, that it's all determined. I don't believe that, and a lot of the scientists I talk to think it's shaped by all the things that went on unconsciously or in our history. But we still have some ability to say yes or no. We have what some people call free won't. We can say
free
no.
Won't, not
yeah,
free
no,
will.
Right.
Okay.
So I won't do that. But some of the things that the way our culture influences us is really profound. So if you take a look at, say, American and Chinese tourists looking at the Mona Lisa, the Americans, the Chinese eyes will go all over the painting, looking at context, looking at the whole painting. The American eyes will focus on the mouth of the Mona Lisa and her eyes. We have a much more concentrated way of looking at the world. And so that's pretty deep, and that comes from our past, from our culture. And so that shapes how we relate. Another study, somebody had the bright idea of looking at people having coffee. This goes back to relationships. And how often did they reach across the table and touch somebody on the wrist just for emphasis? So in Rio de Janeiro, it was 180 touches an hour. In Paris, I think it was 120. In London, it was 0 touches an hour. They don't do that. They don't touch. And so again, that's the power of culture shaping how we behave. But that doesn't mean if you're born in Rio, you're bound to be the most extroverted person on earth. You have some control over these things.
What about, that's fascinating, what about the teacher? We have kids going to school today who have really limited allegiance to going to school.
Right.
And the teacher has a profound effect on a youngster.
Right, and it's an emotional thing. And this is another thing that motivated me to do the book. We've had 30 years of school reform, but it's all about bureaucratically rearranging the boxes. But the reality is that people learn from people they love. And if the teacher and the student don't have that kind of relationship, you're just not going to learn. It's not going to be emotionally charged, and therefore you won't remember. And so getting teachers not only in the business of spewing out information, but of actually modeling behavior and developing relationships with students is basically the key to good education.
Yeah, they also don't give a rounded, there's so much focus on testing and scores and adding up all kinds of numbers, and without the warmth and approach of some sort of artistic influence. Isn't that true?
Yeah.
They don't seem to engage the youngsters today in theater, in art, in music as intensely.
Right, and I'm for testing because you got to measure how schools are doing. But if you do that to the exclusion of the other stuff, then you're ruining your school. And so one of the themes of the book is that the things that seem soft and squishy are really hard and practical. And so something like art and music actually is widening your emotional repertoire. And it allows you to make better decisions. It also engages you in school. I met a school superintendent in California who said, my kids stay in school because of the ABCs, athletics, band, and cheerleading. And because they need that engagement, they passionately want to go to school in the morning. And if you don't have that, it'll be tough.
What about the politicians today? I mean, what kind of background or personality or skills do they need?
Yeah. Well, in general, most politicians are incredibly social. They stand too close to you, they rub your head, they just invade your personal space. They can go in a room and they can feel the room. And so they tend to be incredibly social. Whether they always use this social ability when they make policy, I don't think so. Then they turn into little economists, or they learn from economists and ignore everything else. And so that's a problem. We happen to have, about to run for president, 2 guys who are not the most social, actually. Barack Obama is a bit of a writer, a bit more loner. He's not a total loner, but a little more than most politicians. And Mitt Romney, too. There's a little cold air between him and people. There's not an instant embrace. But you get a guy like Bill Clinton, and he's like the perfect, just his social antennae.
It's terrific. There was an article, op-ed piece that you wrote today in the New York Times. You were with your son, your 12-year-old son, in South Carolina. And he went up to Newt Gingrich. And there was a little interplay there.
Yeah, I was across the room, so I wasn't right there, but I was sort of watching the body language. And he asked Newt Gingrich about gay marriage. I think he said, I'm no expert on marriage, but shouldn't 2 men be allowed to marry? And Gingrich said, no, it's in the Bible. They can't. And he said, well, there's slavery in the Bible. And then Gingrich signaled to a security guard, get that kid away
Get
from
that
me.
kid away from me. On that note, we're going to take a break. We'll be back with the remainder of the program right after this brief message.
I'm Mark Levy, President of the Jewish Federation of Palm Beach County.
And I'm Zelda Mason, Chair of Federation's Golden Anniversary Celebration. In the months to come, our Federation will commemorate this Golden Anniversary year with many exciting programs, including the premiere event with commentator David Brooks, Women's Philanthropy Pride of Our Lions, and B&P's Big Night Out with Jason Alexander. So please, plan to join us as we honor our past and toast our future.
Just out of reach, down the block on a beach.
Happy 50th anniversary.
Maybe tonight, maybe tonight.
Welcome back to Mosaic. Prior to the break, we were talking about David Brooks' very, very charming young son, who's about to become a bar mitzvah.
Correct. We hope.
Congratulations. Listen, this took you 3 years to write.
Yeah, even more, a little more.
A little more?
Yeah.
The research was extraordinary. I mean, you document it in the back of the book.
Yeah.
Did it change you in any way?
Well, I think I'm much more aware of the patterns of emotions around me. I'm much more aware of the emotions inside. And you know, here's a trivial example, but this is indicative. So I'm in the parking lot about to go to the dentist, and I'm writing out a nasty email. And the whole rest of the week, I regret that I wrote this email. And then I'm back for another visit, and I'm in the parking lot again. I find myself writing a nasty email. And it occurs to me the anxiety from the dentist is being transferred into my emails. And so that's a trivial example, but it makes you aware of the way your unconscious is shaping who you are, and it makes you aware of the power of relationships and how they actually develop and grow.
You know something, Putnam's book, Bowling Alone,
Right.
No more front porches, only back porches, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
There's a lack of social capital that we have.
Yeah.
And doesn't that concern you?
Yeah, absolutely. And here's another way the book has changed me. So I bought a house in Bethesda, Maryland, and I wanted a big backyard so my kids could run around and play. So we moved a little further out from Washington, but because we have a big backyard, we're far from our neighbors. And now I realize that was a mistake. So we should have stayed maybe in district and where we could really have a real neighborhood. And so you realize that, and I think the country's made that mistake. And here in Florida, you go out to Douglas County, Colorado, or Arizona, you had a lot of expansion of these vast, sprawling suburbs. And often people spread out so far that they lost contact with a lot of each other. And so one of the interesting things I noticed learned from home builders, that in the 90s they asked people, what do you want in your housing project? And they said, we want golf courses. But then they asked them in the last few years, what do you want in your housing development? They said, we want a Starbucks, we want a walking trail, we want a community center. They want places where they can gather.
So that's nice.
And so I think the whole country sort of lost touch with that, and I think we're getting it back, actually.
Well, but the young people, in all fairness, really spend a great deal of time with their computers. They're by themselves. They have relationships online, but it's not a very social, touchy-feely kind of a thing.
And so more or less the jury's out on that, but there have been a couple studies on that. And the question is, when kids are on Facebook, are they supplementing their friendships or are they just adding to their friendships? And I think most of the evidence is they're adding to their friendships. That if it's what you bring to Facebook, not Facebook itself, that changes you. If you're a very social person with good friendships, then you just use it as another way to communicate, but you'll still have the face-to-face. But if you're a lonely person, you can mask your loneliness by having these pseudo-friendships online.
You know, David, you're here for a special event, the premier event for the Jewish Federation. And I was wondering, what message are you going to give the people tonight? Well,
like we've been talking about the power of relationships and things that are deep inside ourselves. And for those of us who are Jewish, one of the things that's deep inside ourselves is thousands of years of Jewish history. And so I'm going to try to describe, hopefully in a somewhat witty way, how the history of our people influences us, how it shakes us, brings us back to certain behaviors, the tradition of Tikkun Olam, how it ties us to Israel, and how to think about American politics and Middle East politics through the lens of sort of the deep cultural influences that make Jews different than other people, and the gifts we've really inherited from our past.
Yeah, that's beautiful. All right, let's talk about Bobos. Bobos in Paradise. First of all, explain what Bobos is.
Yeah, so Bobos is bourgeois bohemian, people with one
Say
way
it
to
slowly
put
again, so everybody
bourgeois
get
bohemian.
so they
So
get
people who
yeah.
one way to put it is people with 60s values and contemporary money. And so Restoration Hardware, Ben & Jerry's ice cream, the ice cream company with its own foreign policy. I think I joke in that book that Ben & Jerry's should make a pacifist toothpaste, doesn't kill germs, just ask them to leave, would be a big seller. Those organic grocery stores like Whole Foods and Trader Joe's, where all the cashiers look like Amnesty International. They come from Amnesty International, and so really it's a combination of real money making and luxury, but it's no longer lobsters and caviar and champagne. It's nubby breads and old slate for your shower stalls. So it describes the whole style of life. Who people are pretty well off, but want to pretend they still are spiritually pure.
Well, there's a blending of the '60s and the 2000.
Yeah.
2000. When did you write the book? In 2000.
It came out in 2000.
2000.
So it actually came out at the height of the .com boom. So it was really describing, Steve Jobs, a business executive in jeans and a black T-shirt and all that sort of stuff.
You know something, do you think that if your concept of understanding people and developing morality in certain ways, do you think that's going to change the way the world looks at people who are different than they are?
I think it will. I think we're in the middle. The neuroscience and the cognitive science that is in the paper every day and that I researched really is going to have a big effect on how we think. We've sort of inherited a view that we're all driven by economics, and then we're inarticulate about character and morality and relationships. We think of ourselves as these autonomous individuals. We don't judge the space between people. And so I think we're going to enter a phase where we're much more attuned to that, to the space between people. And we'll understand that, say, in relating with people of different races, we have inbuilt biases toward our own group. But you have to consciously try to overcome that just to be a decent person.
You know something, it's the part of the problem, I think, I was just reading today about the discussions in the Middle East and how they're trying desperately again to start all over again with the peace process. And there's such a level of mistrust.
Right.
How you develop a sense of trust and acceptance is beyond me.
Yeah. And I think the evidence from history and from research shows you can't change your mind. You can't say, I'm going to suddenly decide to trust those people. You have to change your behavior, and then you change your mind. Or the folks at Alcoholics Anonymous have a phrase, fake it till you make it. And so you actually have to do things with people of other, say, across that line. Back in I covered the Middle East during the Oslo process in the 90s. And my oldest son, who's now 20, was 3, and he would only sleep when he was in a car. So I'd get in a car in Jerusalem, and I'd drive around Ramallah and Hebron, and so he'd sleep in the back. I'd just drive around the West Bank. And you could do that in those days. And it's all fallen apart. And so I think we're in for a long, bad period until Hamas is really sort of that goes away or becomes less important.
Do you think that's possible? I mean, that's a pretty wonderful open statement that you just made, but I'm not sure that's possible.
I don't think it's possible soon, but
No.
I don't think it's a successful belief system. I think for people who want to enjoy the modern world and lead rich lives, I don't think the radical Islamicist system is going to be a long-run solution for them. But there's got to be a period, and it's going to be a long period, and we just have to try to survive it.
Well, it's interesting also. We have this terrible challenge of Iran, and the fact that the administration is being sanctioned because they feel that we're not taking an aggressive enough stance.
Right.
How do you feel?
Yeah, I'm worried about Iran. I speak to a lot of military people, and they're really worried about Iran. They're worried that they might get a nuclear weapon within a year. And I don't have much faith in bombing Iran, though, from the experts I speak to. I don't have much faith that that would really set back their program. And so, I guess I think two things. One, the sanctions. They're pushing on the sanctions to make it crippling, and I think it is beginning to cripple. But fundamentally, I think regime change is the only option, and that doesn't mean we do it, but somehow trying to support the people. I think the regime is more fragile than the nuclear program, and somehow hoping that the people who really do despise the regime can overthrow it at some point. That would change the game.
I want to tell you something. I think that we should send copies of your book. We had a huge success in England.
Yes.
Tell about that. Tell about what happened.
Yeah, I'm like David Hasselhoff. I'm bigger in Europe than here. It was funny there because it was embraced by the political leaders.
Yeah.
So it's not a particularly political book.
No.
But David Cameron, the Prime Minister, was a big fan of it, and Ed Miliband, the Labour leader, the opposition leader. So I came in and I gave seminars separately to the Labour people and to the Conservative people, and it got a lot of media play. And it's good. I'm a big Anglophile. My turtles when I was a kid were Disraeli and Gladstone. I come from a Jewish culture in New York where the phrase was think Yiddish, act British. And so I was glad to spend time in Britain.
So you mean to say there hasn't been a great response to this book? I think you're wrong. I think this book
oh
is
yeah,
terrific.
no, it's done. It's sold very well, and so I'm very pleased by that. But it was just funny to be a little media superstar in Britain for a little while. That was fun.
No, I think it's really neat. Tell me what's next on the horizon for David Brooks?
It sounds corny to say, but I'm writing a book about the history of the idea of humility, because I think it's something we lack, and I think there are great historical examples.
Like?
One little example of where we are today, a little polling data. So in 1950, the Gallup organization asked high school seniors, are you a very important person? And in 1950, 12% said yes. They asked again in 2005, and 80% said yes, I'm a very important person. So things have changed. We've told the generation how special they are, and they believed us. And so I think that's had a very bad effect. But there's a tradition of humility and how to be. Jim Collins, the great business writer, says the executives he knows who have been really truly successful combine two qualities: extreme personal humility with extreme personal willpower.
I like
and
that.
so they're both humble, but they're also assertive. They're not shy, and they don't just sit in the corner. And so there's a tradition of that. And since we're here on behalf of the Jewish Federation, I should mention it starts with Moses. Yeah. If you go back in the ancient world, who were the big heroes? They were big kings with lavish retinues saying, I'm the greatest. They were Achilles and Homer, all glory to me. And then here's this leader who says, no, I'm not your man, God. I can't speak. I'm like the worst for you. And God chooses him. And so that's a different model, and that's a radical break with everything that had come before. And so I really trace that idea to the current day.
In all humility, it was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us. Thank you for being with us as well. Be with us again next week when we have another look into the Jewish world. Goodbye from